Can I ask folks to take their seats, please? Take your seats. We're getting started. Welcome. Come on in. Firstly, thank you all for being here tonight. This is the last in this series of our community engagement forums this week with the City of Palm Springs to discuss issues around the CVRA, which stands for the California Voting Rights Act, and specifically districting and communities of interest. These are all terms that these lovely folks beside me will describe and define for you all. My name is Alexis Ortega, and I am one of the co-chairs of the CVRA Working Group, which is a working group made up of residents in the City of Palm Springs to help guide the subcommittee of the City Council members, who I will introduce shortly, to help guide them through all of these issues, some of which we'll be talking about tonight. So I wanted to thank you all for being here. I'm a lifelong Palm Springs resident, born and raised, and so I appreciate all you for being here and being engaged, and we're looking forward to a really great, informative forum tonight. So without further ado, let me introduce the rest of the folks up here. So we have Jeff Kors, our City Council member. Yay. We also have City Council member Lisa Middleton. And we have the City Clerk, Anthony Mejia, with us. And so I will let them take over.
Okay. You want to go next? Doesn't matter. You want to go first? Sure, I can just do the introductions. You do this time. Well, no, we can do the same parts. So thank you all for coming. Just a couple introductions to start with. Mayor Moon and Councilmember Holstage are here. They've so far come to all of these, so thank you. Just so folks know, because of the Brown Act, they're not allowed to engage or talk as part of the meeting because we only can have 2 members, the subcommittee, so we don't want anyone to think they're being rude or not engaging. But they really wanted to listen to all the comments at all these meetings because they want to hear from the residents. These are being live streamed and recorded and taped so people can watch them. For folks who aren't comfortable making public comments or don't want public comments on the internet, there'll be cards you can fill out. You can also talk to us privately. Alexis has mentioned she's part of the working group. There are 9 members of the working group. They've been meeting, I think, weekly. We don't actually go to their meetings. They've been meeting, doing research, looking at all the issues, and working with staff, and just an amazing group of volunteers who I want to thank. The majority have been coming to these as well, and I think this is the 5th one this week, so thank you all. So in addition to Alexis, we have Stephen Moses, Doug Donenfeld, Kathy Wormrick, Dixie Miller, and Melanie Brenner. So who am I missing, James? Oh, thank you. So thank you all for being here. And just so everyone knows that in addition, the way this is going to work tonight is very informal. It's not like a city council meeting. We're not going to time you. You can ask questions. We can respond. It's meant to be very interactive. So the whole idea is for this to be an interactive process after the presentation, and this is really about getting your comments and answering questions. Any one of the members of the working group, Lisa and I, as the subcommittee, are happy to talk to anyone one-on-one if you have any questions or you want help in drawing maps. All of us, our city clerk, are willing to help. So anything we can do, don't feel shy. You know, we have the benefit of being a relatively small, pretty close-knit city, and everyone wants to be as helpful as possible during this process. So with that, Lisa will explain a little bit about the process moving forward and moving to districts.
And again, thank you. And we're really enjoying getting out to each one of the neighborhoods as much as we can. And it is very good to be here in Demuth Park because it is one of the more fascinating neighborhoods and dynamic neighborhoods. And I know that we have individuals from lots of different neighborhoods, not just simply the southern part of the city here tonight, but we deliberately wanted to go to as many places as we could to interact with as many folks. I think all of us are familiar with the idea of districts. We know that in California we have, I think it's 53 different congressional districts. I'd like to see a show of hands of how many of you got to take part in the drawing of your congressional district. So we're turning that on its head. Usually what happens is the politicians are sitting in rooms now with lots of computer laptops and drawing boundaries and coming up with what the districts are going to look like, be it a congressional district, state senate, state assembly, most cities. We're trying to reach out to the public and ask you, what should the district that you live in, the district that you work in, look like? And one of the things that we're trying to do in this process is make it as simple as we can. So we have paper diagrams that reflect the diagrams you're seeing over here on the side, telling you pretty much an overlay of the 45 neighborhoods of 1PS that we have in the city. It's not a perfect display of neighborhoods boundaries, because as those of us who've been involved in 1PS know, 1PS does not cover 100% of the city of Palm Springs. Our elections do. So the demographer overlaid as best he could, did some adjustments to the districts. The demographer is a really fabulous firm, but they're in Glendale, California, and they are working on maps all over the state of California, because cities all over California are making this transition from at-large to districts. And the reason that they're doing so is the California legislature made a decision that at-large voting has historically been used to disadvantage minority voters. And there are clear examples of cities where, because elections have been held at large, you've not seen, even though there's 40% of the population that is minority, individuals in a minority group being able to elect an individual. So the legislature, through a variety of laws called the California Voting Rights Act, has taken and put their thumb on the scales to push cities towards district voting. And we received a letter from plaintiff's attorney earlier this year, very much like other cities in California have received. One of the things that comes up when you just get one of those letters is you have to decide, are you going to fight, or are you going to work with the plaintiffs to do the districts? We made a decision unanimously by City Council that we wanted to do the districts. Part of that was in keeping with Palm Springs' commitment to inclusivity. And it is specifically when issues come up involving other folks that you need to be as observant as you possibly can. And our city, as best I can tell, over the course of our over 75-year history, has elected one Latino individual to our city council. We can do better than that. I don't know whether or not immediately in the first election we will find ourselves electing a Latino or an African American or an Asian American or a Native American to our city council, but we're going to try in the course of this, and it is our first priority, to set up districts in a way that increases the political power of minority voters. And that is something we'll walk through. If you are a really, really literate computer geek, the mapping systems that the professional demographers use are going to be available to you, and they are they're extremely agile if you know what you're doing. For most of us, we're going to be using some variation off of those tools, and Anthony's going to walk you through some of what we have. These meetings this week are not going to be the only meetings that we will have, and one of the things that Anthony is already committed to is to take in, meet individually with people, as well as do some small training sessions with groups of individuals that are interested in really getting down and learning how to use the tool. But it is always going to be able for you to take the paper map and start drawing using a calculator and a paper map to get to the kind of districts that we need. Ultimately, in October, we have two choices to make. We are either going to have 4 districts of approximately 11,000 people in a district with an at-large mayor, or we will have 5 districts of approximately 9,000 people with the mayor elected or chosen from among the 5 members of the city council. And I know there's going to be very strong feelings on both sides of that issue. In our timeline, what we've tried to do is set up this month and next month to be dealing with questions of community of interest. What are the neighborhoods that you live in and that you want to have as a part of your district? And then in September, we are going to vigorously debate the question, should it be 4 districts and an at-large mayor, or 5 districts with the mayor chosen from within the city council, and make that final decision at city council on October 4th. Then we will move to really starting to look very, very closely at the kind of maps that we need, leading up to a decision in late November and in early December on what will be the new maps that we will use for the 2019 City Council elections. With that, I'll give it to Anthony.
Good evening. So if you've already attended a presentation, the good news is it's a new PowerPoint. So first thing I want to point out is we have these cards in the back. So please take them, give them to your neighbors. This is an opportunity to provide feedback to the city. Also, I want to point out that part of this process, the city council has decided to postpone interviewing for boards and commissions so that while we're conducting this outreach to the city as well as to, in particular, minority groups, it gives them an opportunity to apply for the boards and commissions. The interviews will be conducted in November and December with appointments occurring or commencing on January 1st. So if you are interested in applying, or if you have friends or neighbors that would be interested in applying, please take the information in the back to them. I want to point out also we have some paperwork out there. The blue papers are in English, the green ones are in Spanish. This is a simple memo helping to define communities of interest and also the full schedule of events that are coming up. At least for now, we'll be scheduling more events as we go. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to obviously inform the public about the districting process, but also, and most importantly, to hear from the residents about communities of interest, which is really, who are your neighbors? As Councilmember Middleton has already pointed out, we have a series of scheduled events, and we've broken it up into several phases. One is the process in communities of interest, and that will be going through September, as well as the map drawing process, and we're asking for maps to be submitted by September 15th. The second phase is going to be the forms of government and election year, and in particular, on September 27th, the CVRA working group will be making recommendations to the City Council at a study session, and some, but this isn't all-inclusive, some of the issues they'll be addressing are numbers of district, proposed district maps, at-large versus rotating mayor, election year, and attempts to reduce barriers for residents wanting to run for city council. And then following that, on October 4th, the city council will discuss those recommendations and then give direction regarding it. In phase 3, we'll be defining districts and the maps. In that process, the city council will review the maps that have been submitted, narrow those maps down to a top 5, 6, and then on November 15th, they'll be reducing that down to the top 2 to 3 maps. And then on November 29th, they will hopefully select a preferred map, make any final adjustments, and then on December 5th, adopt the final map with it and introduce the ordinance, and then on December 19th, adopting the ordinance. So currently the city is in at-large elections. So that means the entire city of Palm Springs votes, and then ultimately the city council is elected. We'll be transitioning to district-based elections, and the question is whether or not it should be 4 districts with a at-large mayor or 5 districts with a rotating mayor. As you can see in this graphic, each of the districts will vote for the council member, and then everybody in the city will vote for the mayor. In a 5-district-based election, all of the council members will be elected by their district, and I want to point out that the council member must reside within that district in order to represent it. And then the mayor position will rotate between the council members, and typically that rotation is a annual basis. So some people have asked, why not more districts? And it's because the city's charter, which is equivalent to basically the city's constitution, says that the city council will consist of 5 members. So if the city council wants to expand that membership to 7 members or more, it would most likely need to be submitted to the voters at some time in the future. Lisa?
So as we move forward, we have a statement of principles that has been adopted unanimously by City Council. The first goal is to maximize the goals of the California Voting Rights Act, including civil rights, equality, and inclusion for all. Second is to prioritize the creation of a majority-minority district. A majority-minority district is a district in which the majority, at least 50% plus 1 of the voters, are members of a minority group. That may or may not be possible in Palm Springs, but we can still maximize the influence of minority voters in a district. Next, to keep, to the extent practical, keep all of our neighborhoods intact. What that means is if you're in Demuth Park as a neighborhood, that we want everyone in Demuth Park to be in the same city council district. If you're in Los Compadres, we want everyone in Los Compadres to be in the same city council district. We have 45 neighborhoods that are organized. It may turn out to not be possible to get all 45 we have no divisions, but we are going to do our best to do that. Next is to maintain the principle that the best interest of the city as a whole remains the first responsibility of all elected officials. And I would like to say, when you take an oath as a congressman, you take an oath to defend the Constitution. You don't take an oath to defend your district. You still represent your district. When you take an oath in Palm Springs, you take an oath to defend the Constitution of California, the United States, and our city charter. We believe in representing the best interests of everyone in our city. But one of the things that will be easier in a district is right now you've got a problem of something that goes on with the city, and frequently what we get is an email, and it comes in addressed to all 5 members of the city council. And sometimes all 5 of us respond to that issue. Sometimes all 5 of us call someone in city government, usually the city manager, to take and respond to it. Once we move to districts, it's going to be much easier. When a problem comes up in your district, it will be your district city council person that you're going to be calling and asking them to get on top of fixing that problem. So we think it'll be a lot easier for us to respond to problems when they occur. Our process is to evaluate our current structure of government, demographics, compare and learn with other comparable cities. We like to say that we're like no place else, but across California, city after city is going through this issue, and there are things that we can learn from other cities that have gone through the process. One of the things that we're doing is developing a graph of every city in California that has a population between 25 and 75,000, so that we can look at what is their form of government, how do they conduct their elections, and compare to not just simply a sample, but to everyone that's reasonably close to us in population size. We will also have that same graph every city in the Coachella Valley. And lastly, encourage and work through communication platforms like this to get as many people involved as we can. And this is our third event this week. We were told by the demographers in other cities, expect maybe 10 people to show up. I think we had 70 or 80 the first night, 60, 70 the second night, and we're doing pretty darn well. Tonight, Palm Springs voters get engaged, and we want to take advantage of that.
So I want to help define minority-majority districts. And so when you look at this graphic, you'll see that there is a concentration of minorities in this upper area, but in an at-large election, if minorities collectively voted for a particular candidate, but the white majority votes for someone else, the minorities will not be able to elect a representative. However, if a minority-majority district is created, the minority group will have greater voting influence and could elect a representative of their choice. So, criteria for helping to create district boundaries. Mandatory criteria includes equal population based on census data. The most current census data that we have is obviously 2010. I know that's a bit outdated. We do get the American Community Survey that's done every year to help supplement that information. The most recent information is from 2016. There will be an opportunity to redraw these maps as required by law once the new census data is released in 2021. And the city will need to redraw the maps to account for shifts in population or shifts in minority demographics. Second part is compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, and that basically is a requirement that the city draw the maps in an attempt to strengthen minority voting power. The second is no racial gerrymandering, and I'll go into that in a second. Other traditional criteria is that districts should be compact, which means that they should be neatly packed together and dense. Contiguous, meaning that they should be touching and do not create islands within the districts. Next is that it should follow visible boundaries, such as major roads and highways. And it should also consider planned future growth. If there's a significant development, you can account for that in your calculations of the population counts, although you can't exceed the deviation that's allowed under the Voting Rights Act. And then last is communities of interest, which is the focus of tonight's meeting, and we'll go into detail about that. So gerrymandering simplified. This is a graphic that will help show that when there's no districts and there's a 60-40 split between the population, obviously the green will usually win in an election. If districts are compact and fair, then yes, the green will ultimately have a majority rule on that city council. However, there will be 2 representatives for the purple district. If districts are compact but unfair, then you would see that the green districts would always win. And then if districts aren't fair or compact, you can see that it enables the minority group to ultimately have the prevailing number of council members in that election. So communities of interest, and these are just ideas. Ultimately, it's up to you to define the communities of interest for the city of Palm Springs. So some of the ideas are shared interest in schools, housing, crime, transit, health conditions, land use, and environmental concerns. Common social and civic networks, including churches, temples, homeowners associations, or organized neighborhoods, and community centers, and the shared use of community spaces such as parks and shopping centers. Racial and ethnic compositions, cultural identities, and households that predominantly speak a language other than English. Similar socioeconomic statuses, including income, home ownership, and education levels. And then shared political boundary lines from jurisdictions, including school districts, community college districts, and water districts. And if you want some of this data, a lot of it is available through the census, and so our demographer, as it's requested, will be able to provide, as you'll see later on in this presentation, what I'm calling heat maps of where there's concentrations of ethnic compositions, or where the landmarks are located within the city, or home ownership status, or income level. Those are all demographics that we already have and can provide if it's requested. And then ultimately the question is, again, what is your neighborhood or community of interest? So as Councilmember Middleton pointed out, we will be attempting to ensure that neighborhood organizations remain intact. And in our mapping system, we will include an overlay of the neighborhoods so that as you're using the GIS system, you'll be able to look at the neighborhood organizations and use that as your drawing. So the demographic summary for the city. There are approximately 25% Latinos within the city's boundaries, and then Asian Americans make up approximately 5% of eligible voters, and African Americans are approximately 4%, and non-Hispanic whites are approximately 73% or 64%. Where there's concentrations of Latino population, they're primarily located in the northern part of the city, north of San Rafael Drive, and then just south of the airport near Demuth Park. Asian Americans, there's a concentration located just south of the airport, again near Demuth Park. And African Americans, there's a particular concentration just south of the James O. Jesse Center. So map drawing tools. So there's basically 4 levels of public involvement in this. The simplest is to use those comment cards and submit them to the city, and you can just describe your communities of interest. The second is the paper maps, and you'll be able to draw proposed boundaries for your neighborhood or communities of interest as you define it. And you can choose to draw that either just for your neighborhood and submit that map, or you can attempt to draw a map for the entire city if you'd like. The third level is using the paper maps along with an Excel spreadsheet and an interactive map supplement, and that map supplement is a lot like a Google map system, and it's numbered and it corresponds to the Excel spreadsheet, and that will allow you to have accurate demographic counts as you're drawing your districts. So as you're plugging in where you're, which areas you're connecting, it will give you the demographic data. And then the fourth level, which is the most complicated but the most powerful, is a real system that demographers use in developing districts. And you'll be able to go census block by census block. And while the map is great, it actually does combine a number of census blocks together. If you're using the online system, you'll be able to go basically street by street by street and decide which ones you want to combine into a district. And as you're doing that, it will give you total counts of population and the demographic data for that neighborhood or for that district that you're creating. Ultimately, with that online system, you will need to create a login. If you don't want to use your real name, you don't have to. We just ask that you go ahead and provide a real email address so that if there's an error, we'll be able to communicate with you so the demographer can make sure that these maps are usable. In addition, nobody can access your maps until you're ready to submit them. So there's a simple button that once you're done, you'll be able to hit submit and it'll go to the demographer. The demographer will ensure that it is compliant with the CVRA. Even if it's not, it'll still be submitted to the city, but he'll be informing the city council that it doesn't meet the qualifications. And he'll also provide a report to the city council on the demographic data. Some examples of what other cities have done. Two examples. One is South Pasadena, and you can see that they oriented their map to go north to south. That's because the minority groups within South Pasadena basically resided on the major corridors of the city which go north to south. And so they wanted to ensure that they were complying with the CVRA, so they maximized the minorities within each district. In Pasadena, they also had to comply with the CVRA, which is intended to strengthen minority voting, but they also had a business focus, which was to ensure that all of the districts touched the downtown in one way or another. And so Colorado Boulevard in that city is their downtown, and you can see all of the districts have at least some touch to Colorado Boulevard. My contact information is available there. If you have any questions regarding this process, if you need any help doing the mapping process, feel free to reach out to me. If I'm not able to help you, I will ask the demographer to get in touch with you. There's my phone number, and please go to psdistricts.com. On Monday, we will launch the entire mapping system so that you can go in there and you'll have almost 2 months to play around in it. You don't have to, because it's a login-based system, you don't have to complete the map when you first sit down. You'll be able to log back in, it'll save your progress, and you can keep modifying it until you're done. And then I'll leave it with the questions that we're asking, which is, what is your neighborhood or community of interest? And what are other communities of interest that should be considered when drafting these maps? And I'll just point out that this is, as the council members pointed out, a really open forum. You're welcome to ask us questions and stick around if you still have comments after that. And I want to point out, this is a work in progress. So as we're getting feedback on these presentations, we're modifying them so that we're taking into account the feedback that we're getting, and that includes the website. So if you have any information that you want to see on the website, if something doesn't sound right, let me know. Nothing's set in stone, and I'm happy to modify it.
Great, thank you, Anthony. All right, so now we get to hear from all of you. So to make it easier, I will just call row by row. There is a mic and a stand there. I will inform you that we are being filmed and it is being broadcast live. So we ask that if you have a question or a follow-up question, please wait until you get the mic. I can take the mic to folks that are seated if you don't feel comfortable standing. But for those of you that can and are able to, please head over there. So I will ask this first row here if any of you folks would like to go up to the mic with a question, comment, concern.
Good evening. I'm Kyle Husflone. I'm the chair of the Demuth Park Neighborhood Organization. I'd be kind of curious for those of you that are here that are in the Demuth Park neighborhood. Could you raise your hands? I'd just kind of like to get a count. I saw several of my neighbors here. So we have people from Los Compadres and Little Beverly Hills, other neighborhoods. Great. I was one of the founding members of our neighborhood organization in 2008. I've been heading up the group for 10 years now. I was discussing with some of the city officials that are here, and I know that Lisa and Jeff are familiar somewhat with our neighborhood. I'm kind of divided minds regarding going to districts, simply from the fact that looking at the map that's been passed out, the population of Demuth Park, according to the census I think this was based on, is larger than any of the other neighborhood groups, basically. Also, Demuth Park is one of the few, what I'd call working class neighborhoods in the city with quite a large minority population. Our group has from the beginning tried to do outreach to Hispanic and Filipino members of the neighborhood. I know some people from these groups, but as I was telling the young woman that's heading up the city task force, getting these groups to participate in any way, in any kind of official group, I'm afraid is going to be pretty much a lost cause. Especially in today's political climate, you are not going to have any Hispanics that are going to volunteer with anything having to do with something semi-official. We were just a neighborhood outreach group trying to talk with people. And I have, as I said, several contacts, but they talk within their own group. And so if Demuth Park becomes part of a district, I guess my point is that noble as the idea is to bring in minority perspectives, at least I think as far as our neighborhood goes, if we're put in a group with neighboring neighborhoods that are not working class, maybe wealthier neighborhoods, maybe other important demographics that reflect the city as a whole, Demuth Park representatives are still going to be kind of overwhelmed, even at the ballot box. So you may be well aware of that. I just wanted to make that point because I think it's important for the city to be aware that the north end of Palm Springs and Demuth Park in particular are separate little enclaves. And I wish us all luck in increasing the outreach that we're trying to produce. So if I can be of assistance in that, be happy to work with you.
Yeah, Kyle, you raised an issue that has come up before. And let me dig a little bit into some of the data. We know that about 25% of the population of Palm Springs is Latino. But if you peel that onion back to voting age population, it's approximately 16%. And we can see that the Latino population in our city skews younger than the total population of the city. But at 16% of voting age, we've got 14% of our Latino population, of our registered voters, that are Latino. So that participation number among those people who are voting age is really good. It could be better, and 12% of the Latino population of our voters are Latino. That is also good. And what we have to do is build on those numbers. And one of the things that we're doing is outreach specifically to the Latino population in Spanish and in English. We've hired someone who is professional in doing outreach programs because we know that there are national political issues right now that do make a number of individuals very careful in terms of their contact with officials. We're trying to create a very different dynamic in Palm Springs. But you are absolutely correct. It's going to be work at times.
And the one thing I do want to add, I do hear your point, and I think for undocumented individuals, it's particularly concerning to come to any public meeting. And we got some feedback the other night about that there were police presence at a meeting. And thank you for sharing that, because so I reached out to the chief to make sure we didn't have that tonight, because even though our chief and our police department have been very good about making clear they will never ask immigration status, and we passed a law in Palm Springs making it illegal to ask immigration status, given what's going on in this country, absolutely understand that as much as we can say it, I would be nervous. And so it's really important we get that feedback. The feedback we're getting from these meetings really helps us on that. So just something we all have to be conscious of. And if those issues come up, please let us know. If you want to share it publicly, great. If you don't, just reach out to us, because we can address those things as they happen.
If I could add something, one of the thoughts behind racially polarized voting is that if a minority group has sent its representatives up for election and they continue to lose, then the likelihood is they're going to stop sending candidates to be voted upon. And so we're hoping that this will be a new awakening for the minority groups, that if we're broken into districts and their voting power is strengthened, then that will renew their interest in running for city council and hopefully being able to gain a representative.
And I would like to say something as well. You know, as a person of color who grew up in Palm Springs, I think hearing terminology like reaching out to these communities as a lost cause is really harmful. You know, we've tried to create a space here where we're exploring exciting opportunities, right? And so hearing something like that, if I was a resident of Demuth and heard the president of the neighborhood organization saying that, it would be, wow, like, is there really investment? Is there really the commitment? And that's what it will take. You're absolutely right. I don't think anyone up here is saying that it's going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of investment, a lot of commitment, and a lot of energy. And I think we all understand that. The role of the diversity consultant, which hopefully y'all will get to hear from a little bit today, is helping do some of that work, but this is just the beginning, right? And there are amazing organizers here from the Desert Highland neighborhood who are here in the back, and they've been here and they've been doing work. Like, we've been doing work, right? It's just that to get to a point where we get the recognition, we get the resources, we get the political power behind us is that much harder because we come from communities that are under-resourced. And to be quite frank, like, if you don't see yourself represented, then there's not, oftentimes it seems like there's not enough of a compelling reason to be a part of the process because you're never represented. So I think that's what we're trying to change here. And it is gonna take a lot of time, but we're stepping up, we've been stepping up, and hopefully like this will help shift some of the language and some of the conversations that we're using now. Because I think you can go to meetings, city council meetings, boards and commissions, and often see the same types of people. So how can we shift that? And this is one of the things that I think that we're going to help try to shift that. So awesome, thank you. Anyone else from this row or this row? Okay, I'm gonna go back to the third row and then we'll make our way back there. So please step up to the mic if you can. If you're not able to and you'd like a comment, just let me know.
Thank you, and thank you for all the time you and others here and elsewhere are devoting to this issue. It's really tough, I know. I came here with two concerns. I'm down to one, but I'll come to that in a second. My primary concern is that retaining the directly elected mayor is essential to minimizing the downsides of district elections. The district election of the mayor was overwhelmingly approved by the voters in the 1980s, and the city council should not overturn a vote of the people unilaterally. I'll come back to that. My second concern, which has been greatly ameliorated by your words, Councilman Middleton, for the first time that I've been able to see, and I've checked the website, acknowledging that there is an alternative to 5 districts, and that would be the 4 districts plus directly elected mayor. I've been very concerned. I've talked to Anthony that I didn't see this on the website. I don't think I missed anything. Tonight you have it. You've mentioned it. I can be assured now it's a legitimate issue for debate, as it should be, and I did not come here feeling that way. Getting back to my concerns, though, I do believe that, and you mentioned the city council principles, that the last one, particularly in terms of assuring that elected officials have the primary interest of the city as a whole, is the principle that having and retaining a directly elected mayor will do the most to produce. Other cities have moved to district elections and retained a voter-approved elected mayor, Rancho Cucamonga, Redlands. I do not know of any legal reason that the city of Palm Springs cannot do that. If the city council is considering overturning a vote of the people, and the city charter for that matter, which specifies the elected mayor, without a vote of the people, then the people should be informed that this option is being considered, and perhaps it's a step tonight you've taken on that. District elections may have some benefits, clearly have some benefits, though as pointed out today in the LA Times editorial by 2 members of the Santa Monica City Council, only 7 of the 22 cities that have shifted to districts have had seen any increase in Latino membership in their councils. However, district elections inevitably have downsides, which can be, I would argue, moderated substantially by retaining the elected mayor. I think I can say I know. When I left the city of Palm Springs, when I was city manager, some time ago, I became city manager of the city of Moreno Valley. They had 5 districts and no directly elected mayor at the time. They now have a directly elected mayor and I think 4 districts, I'm not sure how many. The council members there were up front with me. What is best for my district is more important than what is best for the city as a whole. I respected them for the honesty, because that is the situation we have. The district person has to be first and foremost responsible to the district, and that will sometimes collide with what for the city as a whole. This is not a personal thing about any member of our city council, past or future. It's just this is inevitable given the context of changing the districts. I'm just about through here. I don't have time, as I would like, and clearly there'll be other times perhaps, to describe why I do believe that the elected mayor is essential to moderating the downsides of district elections. It has to do with disenfranchisement. Think about it. We have 5 votes every 4 years. Now, as a citizen, we will go down to 1 with 5 districts. We go down to 2, though, with the 4 districts plus mayor. There is vote trading will inevitably go on. It always goes on districts. It always goes on with the county board of supervisors, which is district. Special interests, because of smaller voting areas, have the ability to put money in and perhaps purvey their interests more efficiently, you might say, in smaller districts. And only the unelected city manager is responsible for the city as a whole. This is where I say I've been there. It's not a position that an unelected person should be in my opinion. I will hand out, and hope the city attorney might pass out, the op-ed that I wrote for the Desert Sun, published in April, that does go in a little bit more detail about my belief that retaining the elected mayor is very important to our city. So in summary, I can now say continue. The city council should continue to acknowledge that the retention of the mayor is an option as we move to districts. Number 2, the city council should not unilaterally overturn what the people of Palm Springs voted. And 3, that there are very important reasons why retaining the elected mayor is important to the long-term civic health of our city. Again, thank you for your time, and if there are any questions, it'd be great.
Norm, thank you. And clearly both options are on the table. Those are the 2 options we have to choose from. And we've set the month of September to concentrate on that part of the debate.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll make my way through this 3rd row back here. Anyone? Grace? No? All right. Stephen? Anyone in the 4th row? Please.
Hi, Kathy Wormick, and I'm on the working group. Just a couple of things. I don't know if everybody on the elected mayor, rotating mayor, I don't know if everybody here knows that we have a weak mayor system of government, which is one of the reasons the city will have a choice eventually. But our city is managed not by the mayor, but managed by the city manager. The city council, that manager is responsible to the city council, and the mayor that we have has functions, some non-exclusive spokesperson functions. They preside over the council, and they have 1 vote on the council. So when we're looking at the mayor issue, it isn't that we're looking at a strong mayor like you might see in the city of LA, where the person's elected and they manage everything. We're looking at a different position. That being said, the working group is really looking at what the options are and seeing how to advise the council. And one of the things we're doing, we're a charter city, there aren't that many. We're looking to see which areas our charter allows for a change without going to a vote of the people. So we've asked the city attorney for an opinion, which we think we'll receive shortly, on exactly what the options are. That information will ultimately become public. But what we're looking at is what can the council do without an election? Are there areas where the council might want to consider doing an election of the people because it results in the best government? But in terms of how cities like ourselves are organized, I looked through a chart of every single city between 25,000 and 75,000, and there is only 1 with a strong mayor system where the mayor who is elected actually manages the city. So in terms of what's best for a city our size, it appears in California it's a city manager system with a more ceremonial mayor system, and then that's the choice that we have. In terms of what Kyle said, when we were in Desert Highlands, one of the issues, and I don't know if it's an issue you're going to want to ask, one of the members raised the economic issue. Paris with not the richest neighborhoods in the city, but Paris with more working, economic issues that we have more in common with people who work for a living. And that may be something that people in Duluth want to take a look at. But that's the kind of thing we want to know. Are your neighborhoods, does the park and the golf course really constitute your neighborhood? Do you want to be paired with everybody else who has that? Is it economic? But really think through where you walk, where you go. I live mid-city in Ascena, and for me, the things that bound my neighborhood and really catch my interest are what's happening at the airport and what's happening at CV Link, which is right behind me, and the 2 roads that I can drive to the city in. So think about which things, if you had a representative, you'd want them to work on what your trouble spots are, and that may be something that you want to think about in terms of districts.
Thank you, Kathy. Any response? All right. 4th row, please step up to the mic.
Good evening. My name is Kate Castle, and I am the one who initiated and established the Melody Ranch community, which is here in South Palm Springs. I am thrilled to see that we're now entertaining this topic of district elections. It was one that I had wanted to see when I first moved here 10 years ago, because I saw the benefit in working with a local representative when I was in the city of Oakland, which of course is a much larger community, but it showed the importance of having someone who lived in that particular neighborhood, knowing what the issues were in that neighborhood. You know, whether it's the streets, whether it's the wash, whether it's, hotel life. There are certain requirements that need to be addressed, and if somebody lives in that neighborhood and they're going to the grocery store, they're going to be more likely to meet their constituents. So I'm thrilled to see that this topic is now being entertained. I don't know if it's viable, but there's one other idea, if you could consider it as an option. I always had a vision that if we were to go into district elections, that actually we would do it more based on landmarks of streets. And my thought was to use the intersection of Tockwitz and Sunrise, because Tockwitz being the main street, and you have large masses of land in each of those quarters, and then have one official that was elected at large with a rotating mayor, because we have a city manager that really manages our city rather than the mayor. So that was my vision, and I wanted to share it with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. We'll go to the next row with the gentleman. Oh yeah, there you go. Please, Rev Kev, please.
I'm Kevin Johnson. I live in the Little Beverly Hills neighborhood over here. I'm also the pastor of a church that meets in this space on Sunday mornings for about 5 hours on Sunday mornings, and so we're like 2 neighborhoods. Our office is Gateway, and our church is in Demuth Park. I just wanted to say, I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is a city of 45,000 when I was growing up, which had council members and a city manager. There was no mayor. I never lived in a town with a mayor until I lived in Piqua, Ohio, a town of 20,000. And in that situation, a person had to be elected both to the council and to the mayor office. So there are varieties of ways, clearly, that this sort of thing gets worked out in towns. One of the things that I would hope, because I was going to stand up originally and say, why do we have to have a mayor? Because it wasn't in the principles, and in the listing, it wasn't in the it isn't listed as being required by the charter. But if it is required, as was stated, by a plebiscite of the people in the 1980s, then I think that detail ought to be in the information. Answering the question of why do we need a mayor at all? Because it could be 5 council members, and the council members, if they need a titular head, could elect a president on a rotating basis. We would not have to carry the baggage of the term mayor. That always implies some level of power and authority, which in our case really isn't there. It is basically executed in the personality of the person that inhabits the office. So that's, it is a matter of just wanting to have an understanding of not to go against the vote of the people, and certainly not the good insight of the gentleman that presented earlier, but I know there are other models, and I'm just wondering if we might not, if we have a weak mayor who is basically simply acting as a rotating president of the council, how about just getting rid of that term? And that is all. Thank you very much for your efforts.
I guess I do have a couple comments. So in California, I think it's just as a matter of fact that we have mayors in every city, and the role of the mayor is different. Like in LA, it's a strong mayor that runs the city versus a rotating mayor where it's a ceremonial role. I don't know if it's a law, but I do know that the government code does specify specific roles that the mayor's position is allowed to do. Like they sign resolutions, they sign ordinances and things like that, unless it's delegated by the city council. So just like there's a city clerk, in Texas they're called city secretaries, the role is the same, but the title is defined in government codes and things like that. However, a rotating mayor versus an at-large mayor, the functions under the city charter may be the same. The non-exclusive spokesperson and attends functions, but the process of getting that position is different.
And I don't want to go too far into this because we're trying to do communities on this, but my understanding is in the California Voting Rights Act, they actually talk about the options of 4 council members and an at-large mayor, or 5 council members with a rotating mayor. And for charter cities, because this is a constitutional issue, the California Voting Rights Act trumps, it's a real word, trumps the charter on that. But and some cities have done it, and they leave their inconsistent charters. Other cities go to courts to get them conformed. So those are the processes we're looking at. But one of the key things, and the reason we're doing it in the order we are, is we need to have the demographics of our city and our population and look at maps in both ways and make sure whatever we do complies with the California Voting Rights Act. And until we have a sense and start drawing the maps, we won't know that. Are we more likely to increase minorities' voting power by having larger districts or smaller districts? We don't know that yet, and that's why we're doing this process first. We will get maps both ways. The demographer will draw maps both ways with the specific goal in mind of maximizing minority voter power. And then we'll have that conversation once we have the data, because without the data, it's hard to know if either one will actually be inconsistent with the Voting Rights Act, and we just don't know that yet. But that's the process we're gonna do in drawing the maps, and that's why once that process is done in mid-September, and we have those maps to look at, and we have the data to think about, then we could see, do they both work for the Voting Rights Act? Does one and not the other? That's the kind of stuff we need to know before we really delve into that. So, but thank you for the comments.
Please step up to the mic.
Rich Fuckling, I am a resident of Demuth Park, who's also here on Sunday mornings. There was a comment earlier about engaging I'm going to use the word minority in a broad definition, of folks who I don't want to be going to a place where there's nobody else like me. And that is a real challenge, and I can speak from that from both sides of the perspective. I worked very hard when I was on the board of a national gay and lesbian religious organization. It was run by white men and women. We reached out extensively to minority folks who told me, and to my face, I don't want to be the token person in the room. And I found that offensive, because as a gay man, I have been the minority in many, many places in life. And if you are the minority and you don't want to be the token, and that's not a very good word probably, but someone has to be the first person to do that. Otherwise, nobody's ever going to find themselves somebody else like in the room. So it's a challenge for those who are not in the majority to find individuals who are willing to take and be that first person that's going to step up and show some leadership and open the door to invite someone else like them to join the group.
Thank you. The fifth row, starting with the gentleman in the red shirt. Anyone in that row would like to share any comments? Moving over to the right. All right, the row behind that. Anyone? Let's just open it up. Anyone else who has any comments in the room, please step up to the mic. And then, yes, for those folks who are in the first few rows, you're invited to come and speak again.
Hello, I'm Phyllis Burgess. I've lived in the Racquet Club Estates for 40 years and born in Los Angeles. I love going back to LA because I thrive on all types of people. I'm glad this gentleman pointed that out. It's very boring if you're with the same type of people, the same opinions all the time. I haven't been following all of this new thinking of, I guess it's called, what I wanted, racially polarized voting. But when I first read about it in the newspaper in the Desert Sun, this was my take. I was shocked at the intimidation of this strange group of attorneys, that they seem to be threatening lawsuits if we don't do things their way. And they proved, apparently, in other cities, to be threatening. Now, I don't think that we should have any kind of threatening group to get what they want. And I think I'm still right on that this is what's going on. Are we facing a covert operation with a group of attorneys that has a zero footprint? I want to know more of this group of attorneys. And this is not saying that we can't have all of this new type of setup, but when it comes in as a threat, I don't like that as a citizen. I think that each one of us in the desert has equal opportunity. I haven't seen anyone shut off from any kind of equal opportunity. I want to know the money trail of this group of attorneys, what it looks like, what we are facing in this is a new political arena for us. It seems that they are creating further large lawsuits that our present counsel is intimidated by, even though some of you are attorneys yourselves. Correct me later if I'm wrong on that, on the facts. At best, we are, from what I have read, facing a political covert move, which seems to be a one-sided ethnic vote for all one ethnic gain, who are really denied nothing. I see that no one that I've been here is denied anything. We just have to step up and feel confident in who we are and what we have to say. The vote for this new grouping vandalizes our present equality and our American way. This move would vandalize and shift our equality narrative back to the Stone Age. These attorneys' money trails need to be analyzed. What is their full motivations? How do they feel about our nation's borders? We need more exposure to know who we are dealing with. So far, a group that has a zero footprint. This new endeavor would sensationalize our already complicated treatment of gender, disability, class, and race. I just ask that you please think about before you would capitulate to this new type of political war, apparently, threatening through a group of attorneys. We now, each one of us, have a fair chance under our present system of equality for our voices to be heard anytime we want to step forward in city council or as a group. And if we would all get out and vote and heighten our grasp of our current affairs. Thank you.
So a couple of responses. First, this isn't attorneys. This is the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, a nonprofit that works to empower Latino and other minority voters and does significant voter registration and has helped actually change districts to Latino majority because of their work. They have organizers on the ground and they do really wonderful work. They do hire attorneys like other nonprofits do to enforce civil rights laws. And as a civil rights attorney by profession, the average voter cannot afford to hire an attorney to bring a civil rights case. So almost all civil rights laws have attorney fees provisions. So if the government is denying someone their rights and they get an attorney to sue, the attorney does it for no money. And if they win, and it's shown that the government is violating civil rights, then they get their attorney's fees. But if they lose, they've put what could be thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs at risk. Having done those cases, and one fortunately more than lost, it's painful when you lose because you're taking a chance. And that's how civil rights laws work in this state and in this country. As far as the law, it went into effect in 2002. It was passed in 2001. Cities should have looked to see if they needed to make a change based on that law. Palm Springs didn't. So it took 16 years till a letter came from this organization's attorney before we actually looked to see if we were in violation. So it's not the attorneys, it's actually all the cities that should have been looking to see if they're in violation over the last 2 decades that are getting the letters. The cities who did it on their own actually did, in my view, the right thing. Now, there were some questions whether smaller cities had to comply. The law didn't say they didn't, but that was some of the advice attorneys were giving cities. So there's some reason cities didn't do it, especially smaller cities. But it is the law of the state. It's been the law of the state for a long time. And I think the goals are ones that our council and I think the majority of our city embrace. And the only other point I want to make on that is we're not taking away anyone's voting power or democracy. We're one of the only times the majority gets to elect the entire government, right? Our school board, districts. Our college board, districts. Our healthcare district will be districts in this year. Our assembly, our Senate, our Congress, our Senate, even the president, we elect by electoral college by the states, not by popular vote. That's a representative democracy. When you elect the entire government, well, the majority has all the seats. That is not how we work in this country. And so we're just moving to a system that actually is much more consistent with how we vote for every other office when we go vote. So it may be new for council, but it's not new for how we all vote. We're used to voting for representatives from districts. Thank you.
My name is Ron Hansen. I'm from...
Just because people at home won't be able to hear you.
My name is Ron Hansen. I'm from Tuscany Heights. I'm new to the area. And I've listened to some of the things that you're saying, and I don't have a political comment yet. But I do have some questions. This is all being sparked by the California Voting Rights Act. And you mentioned that you were responding to a plaintiff in that regard that's prompting this push to make this move. Who's that plaintiff?
The Southwest Voter Education Registration Project, or the other way, Registration Education Project.
Thank you. Second of the 4 questions I have is that you mentioned that the overriding, compelling interest that's involved is to make the voting system local, open, and inclusive. Accordingly, you want Lisa, you had mentioned that you want everyone to participate. You want all the residents to participate. And the first thing that comes to my mind, based on what you said, was that you are a sanctuary city and that we have many residents here who may not be citizens or that may be illegal people or undocumented, as you mentioned. And are you possibly suggesting this voting options are going to be granted for non-citizens and non-residents?
No.
Individuals who are not citizens of the country, who are not voting age, cannot vote. The boundaries have to be drawn representing all of the residents based on the census count. So we will draw boundaries that represent individuals irrespective of status based on total representation. But in doing so, as I also indicated, we're going to try to dig down as much as we can to how many people are voting age population within each district. So we've got first and foremost a responsibility under law to make sure that the residents' numbers in each district are relatively even. We can have a 10% variation.
Is Palm Springs a sanctuary city formally adopted by the City Council?
Palm Springs has a non-discrimination ordinance that includes immigration status as a protected class in the city of Palm Springs.
Am I to assume that's a yes?
Basically,
I just want to know a frank answer.
As far as policy-wise, yes. We don't allow profiling, and we've also signed on unanimously to a amicus brief against the Trump administration challenging California's sanctuary law. So every city in California is actually under the state sanctuary law.
And my last question is, or not question, but a comment, is that you mentioned that there is no intention of taking any power from anyone in this process. But earlier, you had mentioned that the full intention is to take power and redistribute it to minorities. Am I hearing that correctly, that the whole purpose and function and status as you sit here before us and as the city is adopting is to reorganize and transfer the power to other groups that currently hold that power?
We are certainly trying to increase the participation of minority voters in our city, to increase the participation in minority individuals in their government. As I did indicate, over the course of the history of our city, we have had one individual who is Latino who has been elected to our city council. I hope to see that change.
Thank you very much for your answers.
But I just want to point out the idea behind the CVRA is to create districts and the gerrymandering is intended to ensure that there's fair representation, not representation that overwhelms the city, but about being fair.
Hi, my name is Grace Garner. I am a lifelong resident of Palm Springs, and my family has also been in the Coachella Valley for a very long time as well. I come from a Mexican family, and I'm a little surprised by a lot of the comments that I'm hearing. And I wanted to give all of you a little bit of a history lesson. So one thing that I want to tell you is that I went to elementary school in the 1990s. Now, the 1990s is a time where we were supposed to be, post-racial, right? Everything's good. Well, at Catherine Finchie Elementary School, we were segregated. The teachers were separated out, and the teachers who were Latino or Black got all of the Latino children. They were literally in different classes by themselves in the 1990s. There are still teachers at Catherine Finchie who remember this. What happened is they got a new principal. That principal came in and said, this is segregation, this is not okay. And she changed things. And she got a whole lot of pushback from some of those teachers who will now tell you that they're ashamed of their actions. In the 1990s. This is not an old issue. These are not things that we don't need anymore. We need representation. We need people to listen to our views. And part of it is it's difficult for people to stand up here when a lot of other people have said disparaging things already. And part of welcoming people of color into the room is being able to listen to what they have to say and making them feel like they're valued. So no, they're not going to want to join your group if you don't make them feel welcome at all. And it's not enough to just have one person involved. You want to have many people involved. The other thing I want to say is that just a couple of years ago, we also passed a Leafblower Ordinance. Now, I learned about this Leafblower Ordinance a couple of weeks ago at the city council meeting. I immediately asked my mother, did you hear about this? We have to go to electric leaf blowers. She said, no, get me the information so I can tell my cousins, because her cousins are gardeners in this area. Well, I went onto the city council website, to Palm Springs website. There is no information in Spanish. There is no updated information. This law takes effect in 2019. There's also no information about what kind of fines are going to be in place. Now, how am I supposed to get this information to the community that needs it the most when it's not even in the language that the majority of the people speak? This is happening right now. We need more representation. I went to elementary school at Vista Del Monte. I went to the Baptist daycare that was up there. And we used to play at Victoria Park early before everyone else got to school. I see a district there. I see a lot of kids that play together in neighborhoods up there near Victoria Park. Now I live in South Palm Springs, and my family deals with a lot of issues from the wash. I would love to see a community there. I would love to be able to know that the people who are in that community who deal with whether or not there's any coyotes in the wash, are represented together. I also used to run cross country over at Los Compadres, and I know that there's a lot of people who have to deal with different things because of the ranch and the golf courses right there. I see a community there. I also see a community of the great wealth we have right by the mountain. That should be a community that's together. And then as well by the airport. I think there's a lot of communities here, and one thing with just running the numbers really quickly in my head is that I think 5 districts would be great, because I don't think that we'll be representing people fully with only 4. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
As our diversity consultant comes up, I'd like to just reiterate.
And thank you for talking about the park, the wash, and all of those kinds of things. That helps us tremendously in defining communities.
Good evening. My name is Tisok De Hassan. I'm the diversity consultant. I wanted to introduce myself to all of you. Kind of explain a little bit of what's going on in terms of the outreach that's being done. Getting the message out, getting information out. Every house has gotten something in the mail, in English and in Spanish. There's advertisements in print, in the radio. We've gone business to business handing out flyers. That's the easy part, making sure that the information is out there. Me being a part of this, to me, it speaks to the importance that is being given to this by the council. So, but the difficult part is, as we're hearing tonight, and as history has shown, there is a separation. The history dictates that there has not been much inclusion of particular populations. So if that is something that is important to you, just like democracy as a whole, I ask you to please reach out to your friends, to your neighbors, because this process works better when more people are involved, and making people feel welcome, making people feel like their voice does matter is incredibly important and incredibly empowering. So I just ask that you do that. If anyone has any questions, ideas, I am here for you. Tisok De Hassan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tisok. I want to revisit the folks in the front. If you'd like to make a comment, please step to the mic.
Thanks. I've enjoyed hearing all the different comments and viewpoints tonight. I wanted to point out regarding my earlier comments, as someone interpreted a lost cause, I wanted to put a little more perspective in that, since, as I said, I was a founding member of Demuth Parks Group in 2008. Our original board was 11 people. It included a Filipino man who was the chair. We had an African-American member, and we had various other groups represented. But these were, it was great. It was going to be really powerful. People started dropping off after a few years. As at this point, I am the sole person heading up the Demuth Park Neighborhood Organization. I do, present meetings. Neighbors and I have visited households. Unfortunately, I'm not fluent in Spanish, so I don't have a lot of luck there. I would point out that just a few years ago, to show you that I am very interested in including everybody, at one point I had a couple of my Hispanic neighbors over to visit with one of the city police officers, because I felt that was a good way for these people who were very involved with the Hispanic neighborhood to get a feeling that the city was really on their side, as well as everybody's. So I just wanted to give you kind of a perspective regarding this particular neighborhood, as I think it's a bit unique in the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please step to the mic. And I would like to remind folks that there are the comment cards as well. So if you don't feel comfortable coming up to the mic, please fill out your thoughts on a written comment card.
Hello, I'm sorry I'm so late. So if the issues I'm going to speak of have been covered, just add my voice to them. I do agree that I think 5 districts is better than 4, for the simple reason that each district would contain fewer people and they would be able to be much closer to their representative. The other issue is I would ask you, when placing boundaries, do not place them down the middle of streets. Many neighborhood issues are about traffic, are about sidewalks, are about the street that they live on. When you put a boundary down the middle of a street, you create an orphan street where anything that needs to be done or organized has to go to 2 different entities, districts. I know other cities have handled this by simply moving the boundaries 1 house in so that both houses on the street are included on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. So no other comments. One thing I do want to add is we are hopeful that districts will reduce the cost of having to run for office. For a challenger to run for office in the city and win has been a 6-figure fundraising or self-funding opportunity, which will impact who is elected. If you go from 24,000 voters that you have to reach out to 5,000, less than 5,000, all in the same area, you can run a true grassroots campaign without TV, with limited mail, if any, with phone banking, community meetings. It should make it much easier for people to run. And one of the things which was mentioned earlier and we didn't get into, but we'll talk about in the fall, is what are the barriers for people both to run due to cost, and this should help on that, but also to serve. Most cities our size, a lot bigger, the councils are truly part-time jobs, right? And it's very hard for someone, and I'll look at Christy, but to have a full-time job and try and be on council and sleep. I tried to have keep my job and moved it to half-time my first year and realized, that was 80 hours a week. So I just stopped. And I think any of us on council can attest to that. So how do we fix that? And there are lots of options and different ways cities do it, but I think council pays $24,000 a year. So someone, unless they're retired or independently wealthy, will find it hard to run and serve what is currently close to a full-time job that doesn't pay a full-time wage. So we really need to look at that, and whether that's staffing for council members, so it actually can be part-time as some cities done it, whether it's a living wage salary. I mean, there are a lot of ways to look at it, and that's the working group is taking that on with everything else they're taking on, so thank you all. But if you have thought about running and you see barriers, or you see barriers and you're not thinking about running, please let us or the working group know, because we really want to think that through. Because if we look at our history, we probably have the most diversity geographically in the current council. I think where the mayor and I live has been the majority of council. I mean, it was almost the entire council at some points. And that will change with this. And it actually did change in the last election, which was a very good thing. But it's something that we really have to pay attention to, because if we go to district elections and we don't fix those issues, we're not going to end up changing the council. So just something I want people to think about. We need everyone's thinking on these things, because there are lots of great ideas that have come from these meetings. And as Anthony said, our meeting Tuesday night resulted in a change in the presentation, which I believe is much improved, and thank you. Instead of the demographer doing it, Anthony did it. And it's much easier to understand. The language is much better. And we only know that if we're getting feedback. So the more feedback, the better. And I very much appreciate everyone coming and speaking. This is really helpful for all of us. And we will be back. We're not going to stop doing these, by the way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel Navarro, and I live in Baristo neighborhood. I'm in an HOA, so that in itself is very different and has its own challenges, issues, and drama within itself. But first, I just want to thank everyone who's doing their part in putting this together, because this process is about transparency, and I feel that as a city, we've dropped the ball in the past before on that. So thank you for keeping us informed and engaged, because it's not until you open the opportunity to a lot of people that you will get that participation. And so what I honestly feel with a lot of the comments that have been said here prior, I kind of hear a lot of fear and a lot of the of change in the city, of not knowing what's going to happen, or just feeling already negative about what's not worked in this city and what's failed in this city. So I think that this is an exciting time, and I'm really proud to be a Palm Springs resident and be part of this, because I think that this is going to open the door to a lot of people to be not only engaged, but also just be willing to help someone within their community or within their district to run and open that discussion and have that dialogue for the first time. I think we are going to see a lot of that. I have a lot of friends that are Latino, that are African American, that are already talking about possibly sketching out boundaries to form the districts. So this is something that I'm extremely in favor for, especially the 5 districts to be drawn out in the city. And I just want to thank everyone who's making an effort on this. And just a couple of suggestions that I think that we should keep in mind. I think that City Hall could be very intimidating for a lot of people. The structure itself and the process and government, that maybe if when we get to that point of having 5 districts, that seeing those individuals have maybe either like office hours or like a satellite office within those districts, just so folks within that community in that district feel like they're able to go up and talk to those people on a more casual, friendly basis as well too. And so I just hope that we keep being more engaged, and I appreciate everyone's comment, but let's really go into it with an open mind, and I feel like this is really good for us as a city, because we've come a long way, and I think we could come even further with having this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a great idea.
As you're drawing these maps, please, if you have any technical needs, if you need more demographic information, I'm happy to try to get that for you. If we have it, we'll get it to you. And also, when you're submitting your maps, please add a description. It's really important for the City Council to know what you intended that map to represent.
Hey, Anthony, just can you put back the contact information slide, just so that's up for folks who want to write down the contact information. psdistricts.com has all of that, but just so people here, I saw some people writing and they may not have finished, so thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is, can you hear me? My name is Raymond Ergo. I'm a recent resident here in Palm Springs. I hold a degree in sociology and a master's degree in urban and regional planning. And it's two things I've learned in my training and education. In Sociology 101, the problem of the minority is the problem for the majority. And the second thing I've learned in sociological statistics and demography, when I saw the districting plan, I immediately made an identification of statistics, what we call stratified random sampling, which is a more direct way of getting to people or getting opinions from people when you do surveys. And the districting plan, I think, supports that concept from a sociological and demographic point of view. I hope that puts things in perspective.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? Closing statements?
Thank you all for coming out. This was really helpful for us, and as always, Palm Springs people have incredible diversity of opinion and incredible diversity of talent. It is a pleasure to serve in this city. We're going to do everything we can to get this right. Nobody gets it perfect. And one of the things that we are committed to doing is learning from mistakes, learning from the things that we didn't get right, so that we can move forward. And we're going to be around here for a little while afterwards, so if you want to come up and talk one-on-one with us, we're going to be here, and there will be many more meetings to come after this. So thank you all.